let's try this one more time. Gee,
Okay. Okay.
hopefully we can get it this time because I had to restart my computer. This is nuts. This is welcome to Life in Zoom. Welcome to Life in COVID / Life in Zoom.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is
Take two.
welcome to Ask When, everyone. Today with me I have Bill. Bill and I met because I was doing an interview on IMTV, which is a national broadcast, actually international broadcast. And Bill actually, I have been on their show twice, and Bill actually appeared once to have to ask me questions about politics. And granted, it wasn't a screaming match either. It was simple and nice conversation about politics. And my interviewer out of South Africa wanted to learn so much about cerebral palsy that's why he had me on the show twice. And so I'm going to let Bill take it away and explain his story and how he landed up doing politics for TV.
Okay. Well, thank you, Win. Again, it's a real pleasure. And I'm honored to be on your show, and the invitation is an honor. As you know, we met when you were being interviewed on Mindset 101. And that was a real interesting interview. And I dropped in just to hear because I was interested about cerebral palsy and its effect. But just for the audience's sake, the conversation moved over to journalism. And
Yes.
and just to remind you, Win, I know you do, that it was, that perhaps some people viewed you not as a journalist first, but rather as a person with other abilities first.
They still do. They forget that I'm getting my degree in my passion, which is journalism. And so you brought up a good point. One of the things that Bill asked me during that interview, he goes, well, would you ever consider going to Washington, D.C. to legislate for people with disabilities? And I'm like, well, that's a good point. And so many people want me out of school / want me in the field. It's not even funny.
Right. Well, I think this, and at a later point, I can explain how I came to journalism, and it was kind of through activism. But you are obviously coming to journalism straight through journalism, which is pulling you towards activism.
Yeah.
But, what I do just as an observation, I think you can do both. I mean, I think on the one hand that you can certainly be a journalist covering all the stories out there, but then also you're in a unique position to be a journalist who happens to have other abilities, and you can point that out.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we were talking about it, and because it was real interesting, and I think the subject goes a little bit broader than just cerebral palsy. I mean, it affects a whole array of people that society calls disabled, and I choose, if it's okay, I call otherly abled.
That's okay. That's fine
Okay.
with me.
Okay, because for example, in journalism specifically, I think one of your initial frustrations, if I recall correctly, was, and I had asked, when you are looking for an assignment, are they assigning you story? Are they pigeonholing you as a journalist rather than letting you be a journalist and covering whatever story is on the board? You remember that? Okay.
They are pigeonholing me because and they will continue to pigeonhole me as a result, because they don't see that I do things a little bit differently.
Okay.
I use speech dictation. To get my thoughts down, I use speech dictation, but people don't see that. They want, let's say, the perfect journalist. And we're not all perfect. We're not all perfect. I mean, we're humans. I'm human just as much as the rest of you guys. But would you quit giving me, and I actually have done research, and I said this when you were interviewing me and asking questions on Mind Closet 101. I said this, um, that a lot of stories with cerebral palsy have to do with help me, help me, help me, help me, help
Right.
me.
Uh-huh.
I'm so desperate to get a new band. I actually did research on that for one of my papers slash I was just curious about it. So what I want to do is interview not only people with disabilities, but interview the people that help them, such as the aides and the caregivers and the teachers
Uh-huh.
who help them, and then we'll just do what we can as far as disabilities. And so I want to be treated as a normal journalist who just happens to have the gifts of cerebral palsy.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things, because it has been historically an ongoing challenge in this regard, that the quote unquote establishment, they, okay, they've always been hostile to other groups. And I don't necessarily want to offend anybody, but when I say they, traditionally it's been white males. And then the groups that they have excluded have been starting, regardless of other abilities or other talents, women, people of color, immigrants, who are all trying, who either are breaking into the journalistic field or are not being recognized. And each successive group has had to fight the same battles. So, for example, it was true in, I think most recently, maybe a year ago, in with the onset of the protests and the Black Lives Matter, uh,
Yeah.
the major newspapers would assign the Black reporters to cover the story when those reporters wanted to cover other stuff. And so the Black reporters were saying that they were being pigeonholed. And then it was a double-edged sword, because when the Black reporters and journalists went on their personal Facebook page or their Twitter accounts, and then they said, this is ridiculous. And the newspapers then removed them from the stories, saying that they couldn't competently, cover the stories as an impartial
Now,
journalist.
is
Yeah.
that because the white journalist didn't, and I'll say this as mildly as I can, but didn't want to go into the wall of doing Black Lives Matter and potentially risking their lives. I mean,
Well, I suspect, if we're speaking frankly, and I'd like to, I suspect
yeah,
I think that was partly true, because the way they were looking at it, in order to be a journalist and true to the craft and the form and integrity, you go into where the story is. And if the story is in the middle of the protest, you got to go talk to the protesters.
yeah, you can't chicken out. You
Yeah.
can't chicken out if the story's in the middle of the war against the disabled. You got to go talk to the disabled person. You can't say, "Oh, that person has a disability. I may not be able to talk to them because all they do is blink their eyes and speak through a assistive device." You got to go where the story is.
That's
I'm
great.
sorry, people, but if you're a white journalist, and you guys can at me, you guys can do whatever. I don't care. I am sick enough to get into where this interview is gonna be raw. but you guys got to go where the story beat is. You can't be standing on the sidelines
That's right.
as a white journalist and say, "Oh, I don't want to do that because I it's a risk of my life. Oh, I don't want to gang I don't want to mask up because I don't want to contract what's going on right now." And but at the same time, you have got to bang that drum loudly because the black journalists are quite frankly getting sick of it. And I'm watching these journalists, particularly on the Amazon Smartest, because
Uh-huh.
well, again, we have to discuss what's going on again. We have to discuss the death toll again
Right.
because they don't want to get fired from their jobs. But at the same time, you guys gotta help the journalists. You guys gotta help me. You guys gotta help yourselves. There's no I in team. I will stand I will stand for everyone with a disability. I will stand for everyone who is differently abled. I will stand for all people of color, all different backgrounds, religious creeds, whatever, the list goes on and on.
Hmm.
And I will get into those stories, drag you people in with me, one holding a notepad, yes, the other one holding a camera,
Uh-huh.
and I will just get to the bottom of it. I
Uh-huh.
am not scared and I have thought about this. I have I have done silent marching. You guys don't know this, but I have um, done silent marching. I did a silent march up here in Aspen, Colorado for immigration reform. And
Okay.
I was with a Pulitzer Prize journalist at the time who my dad was friends with. And back in the Washington, D.C. days,
Uh-huh.
yes, my dad got arrested.
Mhm.
And also, my grandmother, well, one of my grandmothers, um, fought marched at
Oh,
Selma
wow.
in the 60s, Selma in the 60s.
Wow.
So, me being disabled,
Mhm.
I don't care. I don't care. I will go in, I will get the story, and I won't run away from the story.
Mhm.
You guys think I'm weak when it comes. I may be physically weak, but I'm certainly not mentally weak. And these journalists who are scared to get the story, that's not me. That's not Bill. That's not any up and coming journalist.
That's right. And you know, just two quick observations about that, and I'll separate them. One, part of the drive of being a journalist, at least for me, and I hope it resonates either with you or your listeners, um, is a two-part thing. It's wanting to find out what's actually going on. What is, uh, if whatever the issue is. So what's the truth? And you have to listen to both sides, and then explain it in a way that you're not that everybody can understand what the conflict is. And in order to do that, and that takes a passion and a desire to say, I'm going to do this regardless. And you have that. And the thing is that, uh, at least for myself, I'm a person of mixed racial descent. So my mother is Polish and my father's African American. And so, for different reasons, I face some of the same challenges, like who are you, and who do you think you are, and
Yeah.
etc. Just all those things, and or what kind of stories can we cover? And I think that you're right at this point. It is saying, hey, listen, I want to cover that story, even when everybody looks at you sideways. Like, so for example, in my case, just to try a hypothetical comparison,
Yeah.
like if a story about the Ku Klux Klan came up and I'm in the newsroom and I say, I want to cover that story, right? And then everybody would look sideways like, Bill, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. And I think and I think that's the spirit of being a journalist, because it's not about the other things, it's about getting the truth, and you have that. Now, I do want to just make one observation, and it's kind of important to me, and I think, I hope it resonates with other people. You know, this inherent societal bias about how people communicate really is just a red herring. And I'll tell you,
just peeves me off.
I know.
It really just peeves me off, because these fascinating people like Stephen Hawking, thank you very
That's
much,
exactly right.
scientist, had to blink his eyes to speak. And Helen Keller had the blessing of her aid to land up getting her to verbalize. But it really peeves me off when
Right.
they say, well, you have a disability, so you might as well not do the
Right.
work you're cut out to do.
Right. Right. And as a matter of fact, and that was going to be my observation with Stephen Hawking. I mean, even though he blinked an eye in order to communicate, they still went to the conferences and listened.
Yes.
And the point is that inherent is what talents you have that you're bringing to bear on the area that is your passion. And in your case, journalism. And it's your intuitive sense of the story, the passion to get to the truth, and the willingness to go get it that are the essential features. All the other stuff that they say, they're just using that stuff as an excuse, because my sense is, and then I'm going to listen to you, that they are intellectually lazy, that they would rather, because it's easier for them to say, oh, well, we can't, Wynn can't do the job because she's otherly able, rather than, and that way for them, it ends the story, rather than for you and I, in differing ways, that's the beginning of our story. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the beginning of your story. And so I want to ask you, and then we'll swing it back to the intro. Who has been your favorite person that you have interviewed, and then who has been your favorite person that you pulled something out of, speaking of getting to the truth of the story, that they had never shared with anyone before?
Okay, the most interesting person,
Yeah.
it came early on. I was in law school, and I was a law student, but also a journalist, and a speaker named Kwame Ture came. Now, for our audience and our purposes, he's best known as one of the founders of the Black Panther movement, and his name at the time was Stokely Carmichael. So,
excuse me,
Stokely Carmichael.
interviewed
Yeah.
like Carmichael.
Yes. So, but after in the early 70s, he moved to Africa and changed his name to Kwame Ture,
Yeah.
and then has been ostensibly leading the battle for Black liberation in Africa. But when I met him as Kwame Ture, I asked. It was an eye-opening thing, because I was talking directly to one of the leading representatives and controversial figures of the civil rights movement. And it had a lot of branches. You had the branch that followed Martin Luther King. You had the branch that followed Malcolm X. And then Stokely Carmichael at the time was younger. And so he was leading like the younger wing that wanted more immediate action, much like we see the leaders now out there with Black Lives Matter. So I actually spoke with him for about, I interviewed him for about 3 hours. And when I was done, the interesting thing is, I never wrote the story. I interviewed him, and there was so much that I had to process, and I didn't think that the law school students would understand, the story. I eventually
Both
I,
the story.
I never wrote the story, but he was my most interesting interview. But I never wrote the story about it. But I am sharing that with you and your audience for the first time. And I'd have to say, look, I interviewed him. It would have been 1992 when
Wow.
I.
Well,
Um, now, my, in journalism, when you look to who you might want to model yourself after, which I think was your other question, um, I I have a couple of people that I'm really fond of, and one was Max Robinson, who was an anchor out of Chicago for ABC News in the mid '80s, and he was the first Black anchor on a major television newscast. And so I really followed his career, and that was an inspiration for me. Later on, I can tell you that I learned the most from, and I try to actively pursue, a combination of Brian Lamb from C-SPAN. Whenever he does an interview, I'm amazed because the interview is about the person you're interviewing and drawing their story out
yeah.
so that others can, and he's very skillful. And most people, when you say C-SPAN, they fall asleep.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I would suggest that his style of interviewing is so skilled and so refined that I just find it amazing. And so I really look to Brian Lamb. And then early on, and I know he ran into some trouble recently, but when I was living in New York, Charlie Rose, I used to watch him on PBS on Channel 13 in New York
Yep.
City. And I think that with him, his style, with just one-on-one and, no fanfare in the background because he had black drapes and it was just him, his guest, and that round oak table.
Yeah.
And it was really meaningful. And so it so for me, it's been a combination of those three in an attempt to really draw things out. And when we first met, that's what I was kind of doing with you to kind of, get you to, talk about the various nuances in your experience. Because it's not just the fight, it's also your approach to journalism and the stories you like, and then what you bring as a fresh perspective. Because, you being otherly abled, you bring a perspective to any story that they, quote unquote, will never understand.
Yeah.
So how about you? Who do you model yourself after? What was your favorite interview?
I try to model myself after, and people know this, and I actually had the opportunity to meet him. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't, and I actually released an episode about Black Lives Matter on my birthday, and I didn't realize until the middle of my birthday why I woke up on my birthday wanting to record an episode on Black Lives Matter, on how I feel about it, and I did it with my girlfriend because I try and model, and you speak of great interviewers.
Uh-huh.
Ed Google Ed Bradley, you guys. He
Okay.
has since passed away, but he and I also share the same birthday, believe it or not.
That's okay.
And um, and so when I was about 8 years old, I had the privilege because my dad was in the home entertainment business, and one of my dad's clients was Ed Bradley. And so Ed, when I met Ed, and I also had the privilege of meeting Hunter S. Thompson several times.
Wow. Wow.
Gonzo journalism, not a journalist per se, but gonzo journalism. And when I met Ed, and that was a totally interesting story in itself, meeting Hunter S. Dobson, Dr. Hunter S. Dobson of gonzo journalism. And so, but when I met Ed Bradley, he walked into the room and he goes, I just got off a news piece, but I wanted to come in and see how my sound system was coming along. And that is who I try and
Uh-huh.
model myself after, because he was so, and and of course my dad introduced me to him, and he goes, this is Ed Bradley. And I'm like, I am 8 at the time. And so I'm like fascinated by news pieces. And I am fascinated. The moment I heard news pieces, I was told, and then I landed up I was fortunate enough to go to Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh.
in 8th grade. And this was in May of when 9/11 happened, the year
Wow.
9/11 happened. So this was after 9/11. And I was lucky enough to go to National Public Radio and with my 8th grade class, of course, and watch a story break. And this was, well, 9/11 shook me to my core enough. So I decided, as I was sitting and watching my principal speak, and he was in the front of the room, I was in the back of the room, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is journalism is something I want to do. And then figuring out that I could do podcasting and actually get paid for it. I was so interested in the equipment and watching how they make a story on National Public Radio that I wasn't interested in the story. I think they were talking about Gone. Yes, they were talking about Guantanamo Bay. And at the time, also on that trip, I had the privilege of meeting Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Oh, okay.
And I had a private audience with her. I got dressed up in my little suit and I asked her, how do you feel about, I remember exactly what I asked her. I said, how do you feel about people bombing on close to where people live? She goes, I wouldn't recommend it because at the time, Guantanamo Bay
Right.
was so huge. And I'm like, okay, I just got to ask Hillary Clinton a question, and then I got to ask, and then I got to see how the story breaks, and then long before that, I got to meet one of my heroes in journalism, which was Ed Bradley, and I'm
Wow.
like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is if I ever go back to school, if I ever get sick of education, this is what I want to do. And so that's why I'm obtaining a journalism degree as we speak.
Right. You know, it's so interesting because we all come to journalism in different ways, but there's always a hook that just grabs you. And I can tell you for me, and I'm gonna date myself, but
That's
you
okay.
know,
Thank you,
'cause-
yourself.
I am, and I'm not worried about it. I mean, I am who I am. But I attended Fordham University in New York City as an undergrad, and and Fordham has a radio station, um, and at first, a friend of mine worked at the radio station as a student, and I was a student. And then he had an overnight show that, would come on at like 11 o'clock, and he would broadcast until, like 5, 6 in the morning. And so he said, "Hey, Bill, why don't you come and into the studio with me?" And, rather than going out and drinking, which, I did my fair share of, this time I didn't. And I went to the studio with him. And then there, because the news breaks differently now with this increased technology, whether it's through Twitter and other stuff.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
then you still had a teletype. That is a machine
Yeah,
that would type along, and it comes out on a scroll.
guys,
That's right.
right.
That's
They
right.
basically, you didn't have cell phones
No,
to capture what's going on. These citizen journalists drive me crazy. These citizen journalists drive me crazy because everyone in the buzzer has a cell phone nowadays, and it's like, great. By the time that the journalists get there, we have pieces to work with, which is wonderful. But you guys are sticking up your cell phones, and you are thinking king of the castle
right.
because of whereas you were trained on a typewriter with a news piece coming in as fast as it could. Nowadays, I am trained with a cell phone in my hands. And so, but these citizen journalists drive me halfway bananas, Bill. I don't know what to say it because these, and
Well,
when the journalist picks it up, it's like we have to decipher what we as journalists have to decipher what the citizen said, and the audio's terrible, and it's like, oh,
you know,
really?
because and you hit on an excellent point. And the way I kind of view that is this: is that in order for me to kind of digest it and put it in perspective, it's rather that uh, I wouldn't necessarily use the term citizen journalist. I would use it because there's the old saying that journalists are the first draft of history.
Yeah.
Okay? And so in our profession that is true. But what we have now is we have the first drafts by the citizens of their viewpoints, because they come in with their cameras, but they are offering their impressions and commentary. So it's as if the first wave are citizen opinion makers rather than citizen journalists, because they're filming it and commenting on it from their vantage point
And
and not an impartial one. So we have to look at them as commentators filming it.
along with us. Okay.
Right. And then our job is to go in and treat those initial commentaries as if they are the first draft of potential interviews. So while it is helpful, but we do have to untangle. So, I mean, I look at them as the first draft of commentators, because when they show up with their cameras and then they provide their commentary, it's from a very specific point of view and not what we do, which is to go in and impartially try to find the truth. So I don't know if you find that helpful, but that's kind of how I think of them. But you're right. They, in a flash these days. I'm sorry.
I It's so funny you say that because we had a wildfire out here, um, 20 minutes where I'm based. From 20 minutes where I'm based here, I'm based in Aspen, Colorado. We had the Grizzly Creek wildfire, and two a family caught it before the media caught it, and they were giving their commentary on this wildfire before it spoke the whole thing and turned into wildfire. And then finally, the Bill Daily took the video of citizens' commentary and it was fascinating what they saw as compared to what the media saw.
Right. And so in that regard, the citizen commentators who are at the front of the line
Yeah.
um, are helpful because, and now I'll just try it this way to take a step back to kind of describe where we're uh, at least in broadcast journalism. About 20 years ago, there were, let's say, about 20 or 30 different news organizations that covered national news. Today, there are only five. There's CNN, MSNBC, well, six, Fox, CBS, ABC. And the thing is that we at IBM Television are trying to offer a different media look at it. And the difference is this, for your viewers, and perhaps for you. Have you ever watched the show Democracy Now?
I've heard of it, but I haven't necessarily sat down and watched it.
Okay, because they're journalists and they are reporting on the exact same events that are going on in the United States, and their viewpoint is so different than what you get from the major programs. And another thing that I find interesting, and I don't know if it's true with you or your audience, and that is that when I watch the big three, NBC, CBS, and ABC, their nightly news broadcasts,
Yeah.
they all report on the exact same stories. So let's say, and what it causes me, because really I'll watch one and I'll see, and they'll name their major stories, and then they go through and they report it. And then I go to my DVR and I pull up, ABC
Yeah.
News, and their major stories are the exact same as CBS's. And then when I go to NBC Nightly News covers the exact same stories. And it caused me to think as a journalist that that can't possibly be all the stories that are out there.
No, no. And then they put the feel good kitty and puppy story.
Yeah,
at
yeah, they
the end.
do.
I'm like, oh, please. Oh, please. My, both my stepmom and biological mom loved the Today Show. And swinging back to 9/11, I unfortunately saw the first plane fly in. I was out here, I was out in Aspen, Colorado. I saw the first plane fly in to the World Trade Center, and they just about, and when September 11th comes up again, they'll replay that footage. They'll replay that footage over and over and over again, and the kids will stand up and all that jazz.
Yeah.
And so the older kids who must be in college by now,
Hmm.
um, because if I was in eighth grade, these kids were young that lost their mummies and daddies to 9/11. And so they must be adults by now, but they will replay that
Right.
footage. But it's like, come on. And what I'm realizing now is that journalists are so over what's going on right now. It's like, do we have to do this again?
Right.
We spice it up just a little bit. Can't we find the good news story? Except they have to do COVID. And I agree with you. I have luxury of having a Amazon smart speaker. I won't say her name so she doesn't go off, but on a podcast. But I'm noticing that all these news briefs, when they before they dive into the local news,
Uh-huh.
let's just say Seattle, for example,
Okay.
before the before the who's ever doing the flash briefing, does the Seattle local news,
Uh-huh.
they have to talk about what's going on. And you can tell in their voices that they are so over it.
Right, right.
They are so over talking about what's going on and how to do it and how to protect everyone. And it's like, oh my goodness. But one podcast that I do like and one Amazon speaker flash briefing that I do like is the New York Daily, the New York Times, the Daily,
Okay.
because um, Michael Bull, does a fabulous job at just not being so monotone about
Right.
everything that's going on. I mean, these poor journalists, we got our field turned upside down as of March, but these poor journalists are so monotone. I mean, I don't know if they're reading off a script or what, but these poor journalists are so monotone that you could just tell they're tired of doing it.
You know, and you raise an interesting point because it just seems to me that there is so much change because we as a society are re-examining everything
Yeah,
from top to bottom,
yeah,
and the systems that have been in place. And it occurs to me, because you make an excellent point, that uh, when you say that they're monotone, it's because that is how they grew up in the system, and they were taught that that is the mark of excellence, which is to be bland and monotone, rather than at some point interject their perspective. Because at our core, being an effective journalist is your ability to tell the story in a way that you see the story.
yeah,
And however that is, whatever background brings you to the story, but it's drummed out of them, and they make maybe compromises on a little here or a little there to kind of fit into the mold. But I think that we're at the precipice of a change, because we're looking at things differently. And and that's why, I was just so glad that you invited me on the show, because I was really impressed when I had a chance to talk to you. I was really impressed with the drive and the focus. And I know many people are saying, go into politics. I think I was suggesting to you, cover politics and ask them the tough questions, and
yeah.
then report on it that way, because
I
it's far more interesting.
I think I, well, I won't go into newspaper journalism. My goodness, newspaper journalism is dying and everything's turning digital, and I will not go into newspaper journalism. I made that loud and clear, you guys. And if you want me in a newsroom, you're going to have to adapt to my learning style. If you want me to do a newspaper article for you, you're going to have to give me the space and grace, because I will not go into the newspaper journalism field, because everything is turning digital. And when we, not if, when we get out of what's going on and when we get back to our normal lives
Mhm.
without mask, thank you very much,
Uh-huh.
the journalism field will, just as every other field, will have to re-examine what is going on.
Yes, yes,
In
absolutely.
Washington, D.C. to Timook too, because um, everything is turning digital. People are using Amazon smart speakers left, right, and center.
Uh-huh.
Everything is doing, yeah. So everything is doing, everyone is trying to do the best they can. But if you want to help a journalist and help me, help you guys, be my guest, be literally and figuratively be my guest,
Uh-huh.
because I'll use, now that Bill nicely corrected on my little soapbox about citizen journalists. All and I now, because of Bill and I having this conversation, I have a deeper respect for the citizen journalists. The citizen journalists, we just use the commentary of the citizen journalists.
That's
We
right.
may we may take a video and say, can we ask the citizen journalists, can we use this video? But we just use the commentary. So if you see a story that needs to be covered, especially in disabled realm, feed it my way. Don't feed it to the other journalists.
Oh, right. No,
They can
absolutely.
be busy, but um, let me cover every single story under the sun, but especially let me cover the disabled beat. And I promise I won't make it help me, help me, help me so
Right.
desperate that people will turn away from that newspaper because I want to my ultimate goal in life and in journalism is to make people shine. My ultimate goal is to make the caregivers and the aides slash the disabled people shine. It's not about help me, help me, help me. We need to get funding for a van or a new wheelchair lift. It's
Uh-huh.
not about that. It's about seeing people for who they truly
Right.
are.
Right, as human beings. And as a matter of fact, on that other show when we last spoke, you made the point. And I just kind of want to, sharpen it for people because, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what
your,
journalists
your
do.
your point, yeah, the point that you made that really resonated with me is that they all of the stories with the disabled or otherly abled, they come from the vantage point that the otherly abled are people that are victims and should be pitied
Yeah,
rather than rather than people who are people and have their own stories and that they are not pigeonholed and rather they are doing very exciting things and they stand on their own merit and so you're right when you say that traditional stories have been covering the disabled community as if uh, it was, you say, poor me, but it's more that they were in a condescending way looking down rather than being in the story and telling it from the other view, whether it's the caregiver's view, whether it's all the other support structure and how things work. Um, I know, and just to kind of offer, and I will listen. And one of the things that we had discussed was that you were interested, perhaps, you know, and I thought it was interesting. What is your normal day like? What is your ritual and stuff? And I thought it was kind of funny, but because I sat and I thought about it, and I really don't have one. But what occurred to me with that is that that is the question we ought to be asking when we're in the disabled community. So to a caregiver, what is your day like? And what motivates you? And do you find it rewarding? And then you talk to, those that they care for, the individuals, and say, how are you feeling? Because I suspect that the vast majority of people that are disabled or otherly able see their life story very differently than being the subject of a pity story. Rather, they see it as an accomplishment of challenges. And so their story from their eyes is heroic rather than being a victim. And your thoughts?
I agree with you. I mean, their story from the disabled people's eyes is heroic, but at the same time, we need help as a disabled society. And we sometimes, and it drives me crazy again, that, oh, don't get me started. But get me started, but I'll keep the soapbox short, you guys. But it drives me crazy that people don't understand that the caregivers who are helping the disabled
Mm-hmm. That's right. I know. I know.
All humans. And so do not, do not come at me for what I just said, because they have now given up um, their lives to come and help every disabled person on the planet, whether the disabled person is in a nursing home or in a home environment like I am. But people with disabilities, some people
Hmm.
need help. Some people need help more than others. People with severe disabilities need help. Please respect the caregivers. Please respect the caregivers and don't make a pity party out of people with disabilities.
You know, you're absolutely right. And um, at least what I can offer, at least from my personal experience, one of my cousins, my closest, well, the cousin that I'm closest with, her name is Michelle Trezevant, and she's in New York City. And she just recently retired, but she spent her career as a nurse in all facets of the hospital. She also served in the United States Army, and she was deployed overseas as a nurse in the forward operating bases dealing with the critically injured. But when I would visit with her and she would come home, I would listen to her stories about all the patients that she dealt with and how she cared about them, and oftentimes the personal impact and the interest, because they were her friends, the patients, although albeit on a much shorter scale than of the long-term relationships that the disabled have with their caregivers.
Yeah.
So when I come to a story, say for example about in this case disabled or otherly abled, and I will talk to the caregivers because back in my background, I know that I have firsthand experience because my cousin was a nurse, and I know that her perspective adds immeasurable depth to the challenges and the fabric of the story. It enriches the story, and so I just want to say that you were right on point, and you're excellent. You see, and it's that kind of nuance that journalists need to bring. It is that you come to this collective discussion that we're having as a society, and you bring with you your unique experiences, the people that you've met, who has influenced you, and that shapes how you tell the story. And in many respects, how you tell the story then resonates with people who would normally turn off.
And when I get in the field, when, not if I get in the field, when,
Uh-huh.
I am not going to do the pity party stories. I am going to make these people shine, aka the disabled and aka the caregivers, because of I am going to make them shine, because to get to the heart of the matter, whether it's we need to, we're doing this news piece to
Uh-huh.
set up the care, to set up the care for a person, or we're doing this news piece to set up the care to get a mobilized van, a handicap, not a mobilized van,
Mhm.
a handicapped accessible van. They don't need the grandma walked up and down the stairs carrying a child. They need why the child wants to be involved in his community. And then they're more likely to donate to the GoFundMe campaign
Mhm.
attached to the story if they don't see the help me, help me, help me, beg, beg, beg. And
Right.
it's like, really? Enough. Enough already.
Uh-huh.
Enough already. Just let these people shine. And for those of you who feel strongly about Black Lives Matter, and to just put it this way, my hill in journalism was black.
Right.
Ed Bradley was truly black. And so it it's interesting to it's
Right.
interesting to see what um, these white journalists see about Black Lives Matter. And just to tie it up really quick, when I get into the field,
Hmm.
when I get into the field in April of 2022, give me any story, just give me the time to do it and let
Right.
me do it, and then I'll do it. But just don't give me the disabled end of it, and give me the Black Lives Matter, give me the private solidarity marches, give me what you need to give me as you would a typical journalist, and then you can give me the disabled stories just to make me feel better. But give me what you need to give me.
That's right. Because it, at some level, every single journalist has a drive to be in the middle of the action,
Yes, yes,
right? Like
exactly.
like the tip of the spear, to be right there and serve as the voice that tells the rest of the world what's actually happening. And so you're absolutely right. So I am so impressed by your spirit. There's a saying that, here in America, we say hello, and then we shake hands. It's not uncommon in other countries for their greeting to be, hello, I see you, because I see you.
Yeah.
And it's not just a hello. And so their greeting is, I see you. And then the other person, I
And
see you.
even our greetings have changed since we said in all this. Now, I haven't hugged a person since March 9th. I haven't hugged a person. So when we get out of COVID, we're going to really have to examine what we're doing in the journalism field.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think it's, and there's another thing uh, that suggests that you are right on point. And that is this: what we have learned during this COVID period is that you can still have journalism. It's just being reported differently. And which is exactly what we're doing,
Yeah,
because we're at
you
different
can
places and we are
still have
talking.
you can still have journalism. You can still be part of story. You just may have to do it via Skype.
Yes. And,
You still
and
talk to a news reporter in the newsroom. You, as the journalist, may have to do 6 feet of social distancing with the dead cats. Yes, they actually call those fuzzy and boom moms the dead cats. And I have, it's been very interesting to me as a journalism student to watch journalism evolve in the time of COVID. I mean, I'm not only a child of 9/11, I'll be a journalist after COVID.
wow,
And
right.
so I will see my perception of journalism will be this as
Yes.
you and I are talking on Zoom. And I, yeah, and my perception of journalism will be doing it via technology. And whereas
Right.
the journalists before me, their perception of journalism is taking the notepad and going out in the field.
That's right. That's right. And that's not going to change, because now that everybody has, first, that whatever barriers that they thought like it wasn't real journalism, that has all been washed away. And the fact that everybody, one, did it out of necessity, and now they've realized what an effective tool it is. And that has opened up all kinds of opportunities
Yeah,
for me, for you, for otherly abled, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So, Bill, where can people find you, and where can people get a hold of your reporting, and where can people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you and have a fascinating interview, just like you did with me on this podcast? Because journalism is here to stay, you guys, and we need more journalists like Bill and myself who will deep dive,
Right.
search under every rock to find the gems of the stories. No more beating around the bushes to find the gems of the stories. I will interview, I will put boots on the ground, I will book a plane ticket, I will do a Zoom call, I will do whatever I can to find the gems of the stories, whether it's for a disabled magazine or not. Thank you.
Right. Right.
But we need good journalism now. We don't need all this pussyfooting journalism, and we do not need all this pussyfooting journalism, and we do not need a president, and I hate to get political here, but I will. We do not need a president screaming at journalism in the
That's right.
White House press room, by the way. And we do not need a journalism we do not need a president mocking cerebral palsy.
Right. Right. That was just
Yeah, that was
yeah.
that. No, 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 no. We
Yeah.
do not need that. That was when he did that. That was a straw that broke the camel's back for me. And
Mhm.
my father was still alive, and my dad, just about hit the ground when he realized that the journalist who was reporting on the president, Donald Trump, was out in the field and had cerebral palsy. When my
Mhm.
dad just about hits the ground because I'm sitting here watching the signs of cerebral palsy being mocked, and it's like, I know we
Right.
don't mock cerebral palsy, and so I'll go to depths of kingdom come to find the gems in journalism, Joy, and that's gonna be my oath to you guys.
No, you're right. Well, staying out of politics per se. I mean, I should say, and I hope you will adopt this as well. Uh, we can get into politics, but not partisan politics. And there's a line there, so we can get in and we can talk about politics. And in that regard, uh, the facts are that this president, Donald Trump, has done more damage with hate mongering towards destroying the institution of journalism than any other president. You know, there are any number of books out there, and I recently read one. I forget the title escapes me now. That talk politicians and the media they always have complicated relationships.
Yeah.
Journalists they're asking tough questions.
Yeah.
Politicians want to avoid it because they're trying to be nice to everybody.
Yeah.
There's an inherent conflict, and it's gone on ever since the beginning of our democracy. But it's always been understood that journalism serves a purpose. That's why they call it the fourth pillar of government. What Donald Trump has done has been essentially to vilify unfairly, unnecessarily, and without basis journalists. And so, as a statement, he is he's not necessarily the leader that I would trust with
No.
journalists. And
No,
right,
I trust Joe Biden more than I trust Donald Trump with our profession, my new profession too. And my old profession is getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop. I came out of teaching, but I came out of teaching at the beginning of COVID. And COVID made me go dive bomb into my new profession. But I don't want to see the mocking of journalists. It breaks my heart when the journalists from NBC are sitting in a newsroom and he's telling them to basically knock it off. And I could use a strong word, but I'm not going to.
Right.
But I am, it breaks my heart as a journalist. You know, after my dad died, I gave up watching political news because I could not only could I not watch political news due to it was on in his house 24/7, due
Uh-huh.
to my dad had a love of politics. I don't know why, but
Uh,
I couldn't watch it, and a lot of people don't know this, but I couldn't watch it because of what the president was doing to my profession.
wow. Okay.
And so every time I saw Kelly Colbert, who does, I believe she does MSN, no, NBC or MSNBC,
Uh-huh.
every single time she would be sitting there trying to do a job, and the president goes, I don't want to hear about your monkey business. Now
Right.
go away. It broke my heart. It broke my heart as a journalist. So the day the day my dad went into the hospital, I told everyone at my house, I said, no more politics, no more politics news channels. And they were like, okay, Wed,
Yeah.
that's your wish. But no, and I sat with my dad and we watched a little bit of politics in a hospital room, and they were talking about Obamacare and Medicaid and all that good stuff. I'm like, dude, you're lying in the hospital, but you still want to watch this? And he goes, yes, I do. It's ingrained in me. I'm like, I finally left after 1 hour. I'm like, no, I'm going home. Good night, goodbye, because I'm going home just because I couldn't I couldn't look at him on auctioning and look at the TV and see how they talked about Obamacare and talked about Medicaid, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't. But I have given up politics, watching politics, but I do on the occasional listen to the occasional politics podcast just so I know what's going on. And I do listen to the news every morning in audio format, but I will not watch a news piece on a politics channel just because it's breaking until Donald Trump gets out of office and until Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get in office, then I will try again. But
Right.
until my career
Uh-huh.
gets quits getting broken down
Uh-huh.
in the White House press briefing room, and I'm sure you've been there, Bill.
Yes.
You've been
Yes.
broken down. And so until my new friend Bill keeps getting doesn't keep getting broken down by the dumb who's in office, I will not listen to what the journalists have to say. I want to support my new career. I want to support people in my new career, but I will not listen to that dumb break you guys down. And
Well,
I know it's a white room, and I know there's chairs out the yin yang, and
uh-huh.
I will especially not listen to the women get broken out.
Right.
I will not let the women and especially the women of color get broken down. I will let I will not let the white women get broken out. I
Mhm.
will not let the women of color get broken down. I will not let the men get broken down. by this dumb and dumb who thinks, oh, I'm the king of Sheba. And yeah, but until Joe Biden and Kamala Harris take office, then we can try again. Then this journalist will try again. Watch.
Well, okay. If I can, I mean,
Yeah,
I would,
sure.
no, I have a proposal for you.
Yeah,
May I? Okay.
May.
So,
Sure.
okay. So, on IBM TV, and you can just get it on the internet. You just type in IBM.TV. You go to our homepage. We have a live streaming show that starts every day at 10 o'clock. Now, at the beginning of 10 o'clock, we always start with my Washington report. Now, my Washington report is less than 5 minutes long. It gives you everything you need to know for that day, and it's without all the screaming and without all the frustration. So, Win, my friend,
Yes.
I'm asking you to give me a chance tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. If you go to IBM TV and you pull up the show at 10 o'clock, what you can then do is, because you have my number, after my morning report, and then while I'm on the panel, because I'm going to be there from 10 to 10:30, and then I'm off, and then I will be back at, I believe, like 12:30 to 1. But during the live broadcast, you can text me to see if I was okay, and maybe you could watch our morning Washington brief.
I will. I will. No, no, that's a great thing for all of and coming journalists to do, because we, the next round of journalists, need to be, well, they're certainly not inspired by this dumb and dumb who's a novice, but we're certainly not inspired. I mean, journalism to me is getting exhausted just because of everything that's going on, and the King of Sheba in the White House not helping, not
Uh-huh.
not helping. So I would love that. I will try to catch it
Yeah,
tomorrow
so
morning.
so you're Central Time. When I
I
say
am
10 o'clock,
Mountain Time.
oh, so you're Mountain Time. So when I say 10 o'clock, that's East Coast time. So that would be about, I guess, 8 o'clock your
That
time.
would be 8 o'clock my time. No, what I'm going to do tomorrow, you
Mhm.
guys, and tomorrow being August 31st, I'm going to do it. I'm going to catch IMTV because I um I like Bill's style where he's coming from, and I hope you guys enjoyed Bill's style. And I because and God, I love technology, but I got a text saying that Comcast, my internet provider, went down, and so no wonder why my I'm like, oh, the day in the life of a journalist.
Oh, no, I saw that story today. Apparently it went out for like Xbox
Yeah,
Live. It went
well,
like a massive
it's
outage
still
today.
down. A mass outage. I'm like, and I'm on Comcast, and it's like the day in the life of a journalist. The show must go on. The show must
That's
go on. But no wonder why, and no wonder why my internet wasn't working and people weren't hearing me. And so, and so I apologize
oh,
to
no,
my
you're
listeners
fine.
for bad audio, but it's like the day in the life of a journalist. So where can people find you, and where can people get a hold of you, and where can people
Okay, well,
you?
right now, I do have a Twitter account, but I'm still learning Twitter.
That's okay.
So I
Okay.
apologize. Remember, I grew up learning how to type on a typewriter, and so I'm dating myself, and so I'm gonna get there, but it's a challenge. But currently, I do have a Facebook page. It's just Bill Trezevant on Facebook, and they can all friend me. And then there's the Messenger on Facebook, and I try to get back to people through the Messenger. So if they they send in a friend request, I'll friend them, and then if they have questions or anything else, I will chat with them if I'm available. Um, the rest of my story is also on LinkedIn under William Francis Trezevant on LinkedIn. And if they want to join me on LinkedIn, they can certainly do that there. Um, and they'll get more of my backstory, at least through what's on LinkedIn and the curious way I ended up in journalism.
Yeah, which is a really curious way.
Yes.
And and you guys, I'll state this and then we'll wrap it up. But I want to interview more journalists. I want to you guys think, oh, since Wynn's a journalist now, she won't interview her own kind. No,
Oh, contrary.
nope,
Right.
it's not like that. I will support you guys. I will interview my own kind because I got educated today by Bill, and I hope you guys got educated by him. And yeah, you never know. I keep saying, and I will say this before we hang up. I keep saying that I want Michelle Obama on my podcast,
Okay.
and maybe that will happen because Bill, before he got into IMTV, he actually worked on the Obama campaign.
Yes.
And
Yes, I did.
so, yeah. So maybe
I,
I
I
can,
hear you loud and clear.
yeah, maybe,
Maybe.
maybe. And that would, if if I get that, if I get that interview would probably have to, I would have to be fan calling. I would have to be ready for that one because it will be, it may be 5 minutes, it may be 10 minutes, it may be 20 minutes. I am just wanting Michelle Obama. And Barack Obama did a podcast,
Yeah.
and Barack Obama did Mark Maron's podcast, which
Mhm.
I won't say. Go Google Barack Obama's podcast. It will fascinate you. I listened to it, and so it will fascinate you. But we're going to not have a politics conversation with Michelle Obama if the interview happens. We're
Okay.
going to have a life conversation with Michelle Obama
Okay.
because when I read her book, Becoming, and she said this in the book, she's like, "Don't ask me to go run for office." I sat, I sat in the office chair as the first lady. I don't want to run my own campaign. And so don't ask me. So it's more going, when I get the chance to interview her, it's more going to be a life conversation than a political conversation. And I appreciate you guys supporting me. And I definitely appreciate Bill coming on and sharing his wisdom as a journalist. And I wish Bill the best of luck, and go check out IMTV, you guys, because it's a phenomenal news source and it's a phenomenal program. And yes, as I
Well,
said, we'll do
yeah.
what we can to support
I
IMTV.
I think this as well. I like to describe IBM TV as a place where you can get the news without getting a headache.
Ah, I like it. I like it. I like it. Get the news without getting a headache. I love it. So, Bill,
And just one other thing.
yeah,
For you have my email
yeah,
address
I
at
did.
Gmail, and if your listeners and your audience, they can certainly send me an email, and I will try to
Oh,
get to them.
yeah.
And
Try and
so,
get to that. So yeah, I have your email address, and just go, I'll stick your email address in the show notes, and I will we'll see how this episode does, and it should be out in the next couple weeks.
uh-huh.
And so we'll see how everyone likes it, but I appreciate you guys supporting me, and I appreciate Bill coming on, and we're just going to have fun with journalism despite COVID.
Right, right, we are. And this is my promise to you, Win. If you tune in tomorrow at 8 a.m. on IBM.TV and see my morning report, you can then text me, you know, if I did a good job or not, and I will let the viewers on IBM TV know what you thought. I will say, hang on, I have a text from Win,
I
and
will.
I had a conversation, and I will do that, which will be beamed out to over 100 countries and approximately 30 to 40 million Americans.
Done deal. Done deal. Done deal. Done deal. Um,
And if you also, in that text, if you also include your, because I know it's Ask When is your
yeah,
podcast?
Ask When is my podcast.
Okay, so just make sure you put that
I
in
will.
the
I
text
will.
so that when I
Yeah.
say, you know, and I read it off
Yeah.
live on the air tomorrow, it would be about 8:30.
Yeah.
One, I want to know that you're smiling. Two, I just want to know that you know, if I pass muster, fellow
Yes.
journalist.
Yes.
Okay?
As a fellow journalist here. Yeah, Bill, you got it. And I appreciate you guys supporting me, and I definitely appreciate Bill coming on, and we had a fascinating interview, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.